When we don't understand a role or we don't understand a person, I think that sometimes it can be easy and we don't ask. That's what we're not very good at doing. Hey, tell me what's going on for you. We make this assumption, and the assumption we jump to is usually not a positive one. So, the biggest mistake owners and managers make is thinking that their nurses need to be engaged or motivated. So the switch for them was exactly that. The mindset shift for the manager was like, oh no, this nurse really does care. They're taking it and they're running with it and they want to do a great job. And I had that wrong. So there was that trust and that understanding of who this person was and what they wanted.
Welcome to the Scale My Clinic podcast. I'm Sachin, co-founder of Scale My Clinic, here to help general practice owners build thriving, profitable and efficient clinics. Together with Todd, we bring you actionable strategies, inspiring success stories and expert insights to transform your practice. Let's dive into today's episode and take the next step to improving your practice. Hey, welcome. And in today's episode, we're thrilled to be joined by Sarah Boorman from Clinic Academy. Sarah's a master trainer, experienced practice nurse, and an expert in healthcare team development. Sarah's helped countless general practices unlock their potential through tailored training and education. And in this episode, we're going to dive into how the right training can transform your team's performance, improve patient outcomes, and drive clinic success. Let's get started. Hey, Sarah, welcome. Thank you for joining us.
Hey, Sachin.
So I suppose let's just get to the meat of the matter. I'm a practice owner. Why should I bother training, say, my nurses? Like, what's the point? Send them. I have less nursing team on the shop floor, so I lose out in their presence. I pay for them to go to training. They come back, and then what happens is either they tell me they can't do anything anymore, certain things anymore, because they're not allowed to, or they might end up in the coroner's court, or they come back and they've learnt something, and then they say they need more money, like to be paid more. And it's tough times for general practice, so this feels like it's just going to cost me and not benefit me when I send them for training. Like, help me understand more about training.
Yeah, well, it's a great question. I think what I see is that practice nursing across general practice is probably the one area that most people want to talk to me about. It's the area in the clinic that we know has a lot of potential, but is not getting the results that people want. And a lot of owners find that really frustrating, particularly around chronic disease management, revenue, and cost bases in the treatment room. And these are really training problems. Training is there to address any skill that needs developing. And these are skills that we're just not taught as part of our clinical training in hospitals. We're not taught how to run commercially viable departments. And the problem with the training that is out there at the moment, or the big gap, is in that area there. So nurses are really clinically skilled, and a lot of the training that we're drawn towards are clinical training. So we love to go and do a suture competency or a plaster competency, or we love that piece of paper that says, hey, you're qualified to go and do this. But what we don't have is the operational bookends of, well, now that I'm qualified to suture, how do I actually go and use that skill in my practice? What would I charge for it? How would I roll it out? How would I operationalize that? And so there's a big gap in that kind of training. And it's a training and skills that nurses just don't have. We're not taught that way. And the training that is available for general practice can be a little bit scary. So this is where maybe your nurse has gone and done an apnea course or something, and they might have come back so heavily based around compliance that nurses are now afraid to kind of do anything lest we all remember that phrase from our training. I think whether you were a doctor or a nurse, it was like, you do anything wrong, you're going to front up to the coroner's court. I think we all remember that, and it's all kind of stuck in our grey matter somewhere. So we are very risk averse traditionally. So there is training out there that kind of compounds that. I understand it, but it's not a reason not to engage with training. It's about the right training to address the skill gap in your practice. So the benefit of pulling the nurse off the floor to do that is that it can't really be done whilst you're busy in the clinic. We want them thinking about we're working on the department rather than working in the department.
Okay, so what I'm hearing is two things there. You've got historically clinical competency-based training, which sort of teaches how to do something in terms of like how to do it with your hands
Yep.
or with your mind, but doesn't tell you how to do it and implement it in a way that's sort of sustainable in a general practice setting. So that's one key part, that you've got sort of clinical training, but without the operationalization of it. And so good training bridges that gap. So have we been thinking about training wrong?
I think we have. We worked with expert trainers to develop, for the past couple of years, to develop expertise in this area. And I think good training is a glorified checklist. It's do this, do this, do this to get that result. So training is always, always in service to the outcome you want from a particular task. And it's really clean action steps. Really poor training is really diluted with a bunch of knowledge. So, an out of context example, if I was going to train a receptionist on how to do Medicare billing, they don't need to know that Medicare was founded in 1984 by the Whitlam government. But that is, if you were to send someone on a training course, that would typically be how it starts. So, what happens in our head is you just fall asleep. And so the action items in between just get completely diluted in this mass of knowledge and context that people feel you need to know, but it actually just dilutes the action step you want them to take.
Okay, interesting. And so you maybe, obviously you've trained a lot of people and you've built training programs. So maybe in a moment I might ask you to walk us through an example,
Yeah.
a real life example of a training or something like that. But maybe just before you do that, just for context for our viewers or listeners, can you maybe just give us a bit of context about you and Clinic Academy in terms of background, just for anyone that doesn't have that? And then maybe just walk us through an example, a practical example of a training.
Yeah, sure. So, Clinic Academy, we founded, I'm going to say a couple of years ago now. It was sort of this idea that was born just after COVID. And it came really from working with a bunch of general practice owners who were consistently complaining about not the performance of their individual nurses, but about the outcomes coming from their nursing department. And so Todd, Cameron, and I, we put our heads together and we went, we think that there's something here. We went and had a look at the other training options available. None of them hit the challenges that we were seeing general practice owners face. So we partnered with Josh McKittrick from Rockstar Trainers, who is an expert trainer. So he worked with us for the better part of 12 months to kind of unpack our expertise and build this training course. So Clinic Academy is training for the roles in general practice. So there's the practice nurse training that's available at the moment. Practice manager training is coming out early next year. And eventually all of the roles will be covered. But yeah, it was really born of the fact that lots of general practice owners are facing this challenge. There wasn't a great solution out there. And so we partnered with the trainer to build it. I suppose what I learned, or a big assumption that process corrected for me, was that because I've been in general practice for the last 15 years, I've been a nurse for however many more years than that. So I worked in general practice and practice nursing for the better part of a decade. So I thought I'm an expert in this area. There isn't any part of general practice nursing that I couldn't address. I've trained lots of nurses from the hospital system to become general practice nurses. So I sort of had this assumption, therefore, I'm just going to kill this. I'm going to be a rock star at it. And it turned out that just because you're an expert in something, it doesn't necessarily mean you can train it. And in fact, it actually, in a lot of ways, is much harder to train because you are kind of at a much higher level and you need to dig down, right down into the fundamentals to help people understand it. And that knowledge for you is knowledge that's a decade old. So you sort of make all of these assumptions about how people move from one level to the next level to the next level. And you'll hear people talk about this. So if you see anyone really skilled in something, really skilled practice manager or a really skilled expert in any arena, and they make it look easy. But actually there's a lot of knowledge and experience and work behind that you're not necessarily cognizant of. So actually walking a beginner through those steps as an expert is not an easy thing to do. So yeah, just unpacking that was super useful. Learned a lot about training and what good training looks like. So I suppose to give you an example of some of the trainings that we've built. So a common one would be looking at inventory in the treatment room. So One of the big problem is that how much money we spend on consumables in a medical practice. It can become a deep black hole of expense, your treatment room. And nurses, from a hospital setting, we have this kind of magical room on the ward called a storeroom that's always filled with all of these goodies. No one knows how much anything costs. If you cut yourself on something, you wrap it up with like an $80 bandage and no one knows any different. Very different in general practice. And it's your practice nurses who are ordering this stock, who are, really responsible for stock and inventory management, but not trained in budget. So one of the trainings that we did is we stepped them through how to audit the inventory. So understand exactly what is on your shelf, and that's a spreadsheet, and it's fill this spreadsheet in. And then it's, what do I do with this spreadsheet? Well, the first thing that we're going to do with that spreadsheet is we're going to see if we can consolidate any line items, right? So good example of this is, your waterproof window dressing. Have you got that in 16 different sizes? And do we need it in 16 different sizes? Could we consolidate that into small, medium, and large, right? So can we consolidate the amount of items on there? And then can we do more things with fewer items? So this is about thinking Aldi rather than Coles. Like, is one brand of this sufficient? And will a generic brand do? So we audit the stock and inventory. There's a process that we walk them through about stripping down the line items. And then we think about, could we do more with less? And at the end of that, what we end up with is a really clean inventory list that's set to budget. So really tight frameworks that step them through each part of the process, and also a really clear outcome. So the outcome is that inventory is to budget and our ordering and stock is now under control. So that's one of the examples of the training in there. You don't need to write a thesis on just-in-time inventory and supply management. You don't need to go and do supply chain training. It's just do this thing.
Got it. So what I'm hearing is a couple of things. So first of all, you talked about is people who are proficient at something often have unconscious competence.
Yes.
And so you've probably been through this when you were building it, you've had to become consciously competent again. So it's almost learning again what you take for granted in your knowledge.
Absolutely.
And then packaging that to then be able to take someone who is unaware of that through that process to make them consciously competent until they do it enough that they become unconsciously competent. So in the words of, it's a bit of a Yoda style, you must unlearn what you've learned. And then the bit he didn't say was, then you need to teach it and learn it again.
Exactly that.
Hey, general practice owners and practice managers, running a clinic today can feel overwhelming. Patients leaving for quick fixes, recruitment struggles, rising costs, and endless compliance demands. But it doesn't have to be this way. Join us at SGPO 2025, the Disruption Proof Practice. It's a free online conference happening on the 27th and 28th of February. Here's why you can't miss this event. Earn 12 RACGP CPD hours whilst learning practical strategies tailored to general practice. Hear from 12 expert speakers across 2 days, sharing real-world solutions to boost your clinic's performance. You'll be able to walk away with actionable insights on patient retention, team leadership, profitability, and navigating industry changes. Best of all, it's completely free to register. And for those ready to go the extra mile, you can upgrade to our Platinum Pass for just $297 and unlock lifetime access to session recordings, a copy of the Successful General Practice book, and personalized tools to transform your clinic. So you can register now via the link in the show notes in this podcast, or go to our website, www.scalemyclinic.com, and at the top of that, there will be a Register Now button. That's www.scalemyclinic.com and the Register Now button at the top. Let's make 2025 the year your clinic thrives.
Yeah.
Got it. And so that's how you build it. And then in that example you just shared, you just talked about really one of the real pain points for a practice owner, which is, stock and cost management. Owner and manager, probably, to be fair.
Yep.
Managers often doing most of that with the nurses. And so what you're describing there, if my understanding is correct, is that there's a training that they undertake, that means that the lead nurse or whoever's in charge of the stock management in the treatment room can actually walk through a process so that by the end, there's a radical simplification of the stock in the practice. So it's still fit for purpose, but it's just simplified. And then that is tied to a set budget so that there's better predictability about the costs and the medical consumables, as an example in this case, within the practice. So is that correct? Is my understanding right?
Exactly that, yes.
Okay. And so how long would it take for someone to learn that? Like, I might have been trying for years to get that happening. In your experience, if someone did that training, like how long would it take to learn it? How long would it take to do it?
Yeah. So the way that the training course is set out, there's a 15-minute video. The videos are really tight. 15 minutes would be almost the longest video we have. So it's watch this video and then do the workbook. So there's a workbook attached to every video, and that's where the spreadsheet, the audit is, and the action items are. So half an hour maybe to do the teach, and then a couple of weeks to do the implementation. When you go to implement, of course, there's always things that crop up, and that's really where the learning occurs. That's actually where the magic happens. It's not, and this is another kind of big change from training that we've typically occurred. We think that we're kind of learning as we're receiving, but actually you're learning when you're doing. Brene Brown has this really beautiful saying about knowledge moves from our head to our hearts through our hands. So it's actually, you don't learn about stock control when you're watching me blab on about it. You're learning about it when you're looking at all of the different items in your stock cupboard and you're going, actually, yeah, we do have an embarrassing amount of dressings available here. And if I can consolidate these and then I make this change on the spreadsheet. So yeah, it's you're learning the principles and you're implementing them. But then the other thing I like about it is that iterative improvement. You might do a first cut, you might do a second cut, you might do a third cut. You're learning at each step of the way.
Absolutely. And so my understanding is that obviously you've got this training for nurses at the moment and other roles soon.
Mm-hmm.
How does it work if I'm a practice owner and I want to train my nurse? Where do I have to send them? What do they have to do? Where do they have to go? Or how does that work?
Yeah, it's 100% online, which is the beauty of it. It can be done whenever, wherever. So, yeah, you visit the website and sign up. The moment that you sign up and pay, you get access to the full training program. So, I think there's about 18 modules on there that they can work through, and you just jump in wherever you want, basically, wherever you're going to have the most impact. It's sort of loosely laid out into treatment room modules, chronic disease modules, and leadership modules, which teaches them how to lead and run a department. So yeah, you can jump in wherever, sign up and get it. So super easy from an access sort of point of view.
Okay. What we'll do is arrange to get the website in the show notes so that anyone watching or listening to this can access it. A few more questions then. So obviously you've talked about gaps in training, good training versus bad training. What I like about what you've shared is practicality. Before we started recording this today, we talked about action rather than knowledge. And I think as an owner, often one of the frustrations is you want to see a result, or as a manager, you want to see a result. You want to see tangible improvements. Obviously, this program has been running for a while. The training you've built, probably got examples. Like, I think it's just really useful for people to understand what's possible, because as an owner or manager, I've seen lots of training where we have high hopes,
Yes.
but things seem to fall flat after.
Yep.
So can you share some examples of people that have done some or all of the 18 or so modules that you've talked about, and what sort of things people have been able to achieve, the sorts of things you've seen or heard or been able to witness? I think that would just be really useful.
Yeah.
For anyone watching or listening to this, I think we don't understand what's possible sometimes. And so whether you do it through training with you or training in any way, I think it'd just be useful for people to understand what's actually achievable in a real setting, just for context. So would you mind sharing one or two examples of that?
So I can think there's lots of different examples to share, but I think, when I think of the first one that enters my head is a clinic that when they first came on board, and this is not unusual, it's like the nursing department was really not in congruence with the way the rest of the clinic was running. It was sort of like we had our GPs were doing really well, our admin and our practice management, there was all sort of great alignment there. Then the nursing department was kind of sat off to the side, not really kind of integrated with the rest of the clinic. Everyone was a little bit not afraid of the nurses, but no one really knew what to do with them. No one really knew what they were doing. This was an interesting case because I was actually coaching the practice manager and I got to know the lead nurse really well through Clinic Academy. So I could see both sides. That I've got the PM in one ear going, I don't know what they're doing. We're not getting these results. I've got the practice nurse in my other ear saying, I'm really frustrated. I just can't seem to get any support from my practice manager. They keep telling me to do silly stuff. They keep wanting to kind of take over my department and run it for me. So she got real benefit from the leadership modules in the program, which really teaches nurses, because this is not an uncommon problem, about how to get into alignment with the rest of the practice and how to work with the practice manager rather than kind of working against them. So the big win for them in that clinic was the practice manager having the confidence to step back, knowing that this nurse was upskilling in the running of her department. Before, she wasn't making commercially good decisions. The CDM clinic was doing about 3% of total rev. They weren't billing for any consumables in the treatment room. So this practice manager really felt a lot of pressure to improve the outcomes coming from that nursing department. So the practice manager was micromanaging the nurse a little bit, saying, I think you should do this, I think you should do that, get onto it. And the nurse was like, back off out of my space, I'll do it. So with Clinic Academy, we established a communication rhythm that was led by the nurse. So rather than the manager kind of sneaking around and trying to see what was up, the nurse was proactively each week saying, here's what I'm working on. This week, I'm going to look at the utilization of the CDM. I'm going to look at our booking rates, and I'm going to start the invitation or the enrollment process for our CDM. So this is what you can expect at the end of the week. And the practice manager was like, cool, this is what they're working on. I know, I'm up to date with it. And then the nurse had the freedom, without someone sort of breathing down their neck, to go and actually implement on that in a way that made sense to them. So beforehand, they were trying to recall brand new care plans that had never had a care plan appointment before. Whereas this nurse implemented 75 plus health assessments as part of that enrollment process. So much cleaner, easier place to start. So they actually went from like 3% of CDM total rev to 15% of CDM total rev in 2 weeks, just because she could kickstart it so well with this 75 plus health assessment. And then once the books were full and she got some momentum going, the practice manager and the owner were like, great job, you're doing so well. And this nurse had said, like, I've been working here for 2 years and all the feedback I've ever gotten is we're not doing so well here, we're not doing so great here. First bit of positive feedback I'd ever received. And so that just gave her so much confidence to actually, this is my department and I'm going to take a sense of pride in this and I'm going to make sure that it succeeds, rather than feeling like you're being managed in a sense of you must make sure that you get these things done. It's like, no, I'm going to do this because I can do it and I'm going to be really proud of these results. So just a push-pull switch that was massive for this practice.
Awesome. And so from what you've shared there's probably a couple of bits that stand out to me. There's obviously a 5 times increase in terms of the proportion of billings that were from chronic disease, from 3 to 15. And then I'm hearing the nurse was given the tools to take ownership, proper ownership, like real ownership of the role and the department. And then it sounds like in there's been some sort of mindset shift in both the nurse and the wider team around that role or that department. Is that right?
Exactly that. Yeah, exactly that. I think, and I hear this a lot from managers and owners, when we don't understand a role or we don't understand a person, I think that sometimes it can be easy and we don't ask. That's what we're not very good at doing. Hey, tell me what's going on for you. We make this assumption, and the assumption we jump to is usually not a positive one. So the biggest mistake owners and managers make is thinking that their nurses are need to be engaged or motivated to participate in CDM work. And as a nurse, two parts of our core identity are that we are busy people and we give a shit, we care, right? So if you're a manager and you think that your nurse is lazy and requires motivation or doesn't care about kind of chronic disease outcomes, you're just going to hit the wrong mark and you're going to make the wrong moves. And that's where managers will often feel they have to drive their nurse or push their nurse for those results. So the switch for them was exactly that. The mindset shift for the manager was like, oh no, this nurse really does care. They're taking it and they're running with it and they want to do a great job. And I had that wrong. So there was that trust and that understanding of who this person was and what they wanted for the manager. And then for the nurse, it was like, hey, now that they understood what it takes to run a department, there was this understanding of the pressure the manager was under before about something that she didn't have direct control over, but was still accountable for. So through that kind of just proactive communication about here's what I'm working on, here's what I'm doing, they just completely reformed that relationship between the two of them.
Excellent. All right. At this point, we're going to draw things to a close. We've talked about good training versus bad training, action over knowledge, and necessary knowledge versus unnecessary knowledge. Training is best when it's specifically relevant to a problem you're facing right now. And the importance of training from using expertise. You've obviously partnered with training experts and utilized that expertise in the context of general practice. And then the mindset shift involved in training for all parties, not just the nurse, not just the owner, not just the manager, but all of us thinking about training and the way we have accountability and organization of departments in general practice better done. So Sarah, thank you so much for sharing your expertise. We'll put Clinic Academy's website and details in the show notes, and I'm sure we'll see you again here at some point in the future. Thank you so much.
Cool. Thanks, Sachin.
Thanks for tuning in to the Scale My Clinic podcast. I hope today's episode gave you valuable insights and practical steps to take your clinic to the next level. If you enjoyed the show, make sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode. And don't forget to share it with other general practice owners who benefit from improving their practices too. Looking for more tools, resources and updates? Why not follow us on Facebook at Scale My Clinic to stay connected, to join the conversation with like-minded practice owners. Let's keep working together to scale your clinic and build something truly impactful. See you next time.